Okay, we come now to the final keynote of the conference, and I want to pause for a moment before introducing our speaker, because the title of her talk deserves a second of attention before we hear it unpacked. Cycling to Brussels, democratic subjectivity between situationship and political form. That word, situationship, is borrowed deliberately from the vocabulary of a generation that has developed an entire language for relationships that are real but undefined, committed but unformalized, emotionally present but institutionally nowhere. It is a precise and unsettling word to apply to the relationship between citizen and democratic politics. And that precision is characteristic of the works of the day's speaker. Jelisaveta Blagojevic is a philosopher and theorist of contemporary political thoughts, media, and culture. She is a professor of the Faculty of Media and Communication at Sigodumum University in Belgrade. Her research moves across the intersections of contemporary political philosophy, feminist theory, and queer theory, and she has published widely essays and books on critical theory, subjectivity, and what is happening to democracy in the present moment. She brings to the conference something that has been present in our discussions, but has not yet been named directly. The question of the subject, not the citizen as a statistical unit, not the voter as a data point, not the young person as a brain to be drained or retained, but the thinking, feeling, political situation human being who must somehow find a form from their relationship to institutions, to future, to the idea of Europe itself. We have spent 3 days examining narratives, networks, disinformation, and mobilization. Jelisaveta keynote asks what comes before all of that. What kind of democratic selfhood is even possible in a moment like this one? And what it looks like when the political forum on offer not to quit fit the experience of living through them. It is fitting way too close. Please welcome Jelisaveta Blagojevic. Mika.
Thank you, Riste. Thank you for this exciting, wonderful introduction. Um, okay, I will be talking about the paper and the work that I did together with Professor Irena Cvetkovic from North Macedonia, from the institute which is actually organizing this conference. And in collaboration with students within different projects. So this, what I will be talking about today, it's somehow joint work, not only between me and Professor Cvetkovic, but also together with the group of students in last year, discussing different topics that are somehow very much related to our topic today. So as Rista said, I will say it one more time. The title of our work is Cycling to Brussels, Democratic Subjectivity Between Situationship and Political Form. And today I would like to develop three interconnected arguments about democratic subjectivity, political temporality, and contemporary Europe. More specifically, I would like to think through what the image of Serbian students cycling to Brussels might reveal about democracy today. My argument is not primarily about EU accession in the narrow institutional sense, nor it is simply about Serbia. Rather, I want to suggest that this event opens broader questions about political belonging, democratic imagination, and the increasingly uneasy relationship between the democratic movement and political form. My first thesis in that sense is that Europe and the Western Balkans increasingly inhabit what I would call a political situationship. I use this term deliberately. In contemporary language, a situationship refers to a relationship characterized by proximity without commitment, recognition without stabilization, attachments without a clearly shared future. At first glance, this vocabulary may appear too informal for political analysis. Yet, I would argue that it captures something important, about the contemporary relationship between the European Union and the Western Balkans. This is not simply a story of delayed accession. It is particular political temporality, a condition of suspended belonging. The Western Balkans remain close enough to Europe to sustain negotiations, reforms, normative alignment, and democratic exceptions, yet distant enough for reciprocity to remain indefinitely postponed. The language of integration continues, benchmarks continue, administrative chapters continue, but political form itself remains perpetually deferred. My point, therefore, is not merely that accession has taken too long. Rather, I want to suggest that delay itself increasingly functions as a mode of governance. Prolonged provisionality cases to be temporary and becomes a durable political arrangement. This matters because democracy is shaped not only through institutions, but also through experience of political time. What kind of political subjects emerge under condition of permanent almost belonging? What happens to democratic imagination when inclusion in continuously promised but never fully stabilized? And what happens when entire region is addressed through a political vocabulary of readiness, evaluation, adaptation, and waiting? This is precisely why the students cycling to Brussels matter politically. The students from Serbia chose to cycle to Brussels to banalize, not to Moscow, not to Washington, not to Beijing. This choice of destinations is itself politically significant, perhaps more significant than many years of accession chapters, technical negotiations, or administrative procedures. Because what is articulated through this gesture is not simply geopolitical orientation. It is a claim about political belonging, or perhaps more precisely, a claim about the horizon toward which democratic desire is directed. I want to insist on this point because the dominant language of European integration often reduces politics to procedures, institutional benchmarks, and administrative alignment. Yet, political belonging does not emerge only through institutional recognition. It also emerges through acts of orientation, through collective imaginaries, and through practices by which people position themselves within a shared political horizon. In this sense, the students were not merely expressing support for Europe. They were performing a political relationship to Europe. They did not come to ask for something. On the contrary, they offered something to our joint European political futures. Paradoxically, neither side seemed to have fully recognized the significance of this moment. European institutions quickly returned to their familiar procedural language. Domestic actors returned to their usual political scripts. The event was rapidly translated back into recognizable institutional grammars, as if its political meaning could only be understood once absorbed into already existing administrative categories. But perhaps something more important had happened there. Perhaps for a brief moment, politics appeared in the stronger sense, not politics as management, diplomatic routine, or governance through indefinite postponement, but politics as the emergency of a collective subject actively participating in shaping what Europe could mean today. And I will make a small break here because I would like to open the floor for discussion right now. Of course, if there is anyone willing to enter the discussion, because this is not, I don't want this to sound as the coherent, closed approach. I mean, I would love, it's more like something that I would like to open as a debate. So let's see if there is something at this point to discuss. If not, I will continue with my argument.
Yeah, you can continue. Maybe we need more more to catch on that.
Okay, okay. Mine was to ask. My second thesis is that contemporary democracy may suffer from a lack of institutions than from a crisis. Sorry. My second thesis is that contemporary democracy may suffer less from a lack of institutions than from a crisis of democratic subjectivity. Much of liberal democratic discourse approaches democracy primarily as an institutional question. Independent uh, uh, electoral integrity, constitutional safeguards, governance mechanisms, administrative reforms. All of this matters profoundly, but institutions alone do not generate democratic life. Democracy also depends on the production of democratic subjects, subjects capable of acting politically, appearing collectively, exercising judgment and understanding themselves as the participants in the shared world. In other words, democracy requires more than institutional architecture. It requires democratic subjectivation. At this point, I would like to address something many of us are currently experiencing, a diffuse but persuasive sense of political exhaustion. Political exhaustion is often interpreted as apathy, disengagement, or the abandonment of political commitment. I would suggest something different. Perhaps political exhaustion is not primarily the result of giving up politics and change. Perhaps it is the result of a dominant political culture that continuously demands responsiveness, visibility, immediacy, and reaction. We are expected to constantly answer, constantly position ourselves, constantly produce opinions, constantly remain visible within accelerated circuit of communication and political performance. Political participation increasingly appears inseparable for permanent availability. Well, I'm sorry. Okay. But such a model does not necessarily deepen democratic life. It can also produce fatigue, anxiety, and increasingly fragile forms of political subjectivity. This matters because democratic subjectivity should not be reduced to endless responsiveness. Democracy cannot depend exclusively on the imperative to always react, always intervene, always occupy visibility. It must also preserve capacities for duration, collective reflection, sustained commitment, strategic withdrawal, and forms of political presence that are not exhausted by immediacy. This is precisely why the Serbian students' protests are politically interesting, not because they provide ready-made institutional solutions, not because they resolve questions of governance, but because they foreground practices of democratic becoming that do not entirely conform the dominant cultures of political acceleration. Collective organization, embodied movement, persistence, shared risk, and public appearances are not secondary dimensions of democratic life. They are constitutive of it. And this is also why cycling itself matters politically. Cycling to Brussels is significant not only because of where the students were going, it is also significant because of the temporal form of the action itself. Slow, embodied, collective, sustained. Almost incompatible with dominant political cultures organized around intensious reaction, permanent visibility, and accelerated responsiveness. In that sense, the journey was not simply a message addressed to Europe. It was also an enactment of another political temporality, another way of inhabiting democratic action. Another break for possible questions or conclusions.
Uh, 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 my question will be in this point. From your perspective, because the process of cycling, how much uh, because it is an act,
Mhm.
it is a political act who must have not maybe not rationally, but in the core of it an potential of awakening the momentum in because it, like you said, it's a slow physical process that runs through the vein of Europe.
Mhm.
You know, I was questioning how were the reactions towards the students, and if is Europe, the European people, uh, 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 understand the potential of the act.
What I'm uh, there was no immediate message, immediate political message by that act. And this is precisely the point of the argument.
Mhm.
The politics does not happen as a package of recipes, what we are supposed to do.
Mhm.
The political act involves risk, involves hesitation, involves building community, like building these fine networks amongst people, and thus reconstructing political subject, political democratic subject as we know it. So this is what gesture of Serbian students cycling to Brussels should point to.
Mhm.
It's not that we have conclusion immediately. It's they gave us horizon to discuss, to work together,
Yeah, yeah,
build communities, etc., etc.
yeah, yeah. That is why I'm saying the potential of the act
Yeah.
is the potential recognized as a point that that's a point of a discussion
Mm.
among. First of all, it's from a human perspective. Why those people are cycling? What you know? If I was I don't know, in France, for example, I'm
Mm.
seeing people from Serbia cycling with a demand, and the first thing that any normal human being will ask, why? You know, and
Mm.
okay, so they have this situation. Why it's that there? The potentiality of the act to trigger the human reaction of questioning the situation.
Yeah, I want to remind you that although the initiative came from Serbia, like during these days, there were many people cycling around
Yes.
Europe, like it's not only Serbian students, like so. One more time, it has a potential of the movement towards joint political horizon, but we need now theories, we need out narratives, we need out procedures, but
We need our comfort of understanding, so to say.
yes, and we need first to recognize that with new generation and the new phase of political life in Europe, it won't happen in the same way as we were expected. So there is no reason for disappointment or these kind of things, because no one could ever guarantee how would one political generation, fight for the right of democratic life or possibility of change.
Okay, now I see the idea is that this generation is not bound by the emotional worldview of the older generation.
Absolutely.
They are not bothered with the frames of I'm sad and I'm sad or happy or I need that, I need that. It's a but is that potential potent for the new political that will eventually emerge from this?
Dear Riste, who are we to ask?
Yes. Yes.
Who are we to ask?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so there is, since there are not
Yeah.
many participants at this point, and there is holiday in Macedonia, we said some things. It's not the end of our conversation in the region about democratic political subjectivity. But at this point, if there are no other questions or comments, I suggest that we
Yeah.
home
Yeah.
thinking about
Thank
our
you. Yeah,
political.
yeah, yeah. Thank you, Becca, for today. And we had a wonderful session this morning with the. Ivana has a question, by the way, before we close. Ivana, you can. Yeah.
I sorry if you hear him crying in the background. I've
Don't
been
worry, don't worry.
we've been wrestling for the. Uh, I wanted to ask a question. Maybe it's a stupid one, but I've been told that there are no stupid questions. So here goes nothing. You're you're talking about how or whether the students cycling to Brussels were recognized as a political subject, or maybe best whether they were. Uh, and my question is along the lines of not whether they are sorry they're recognized as a political subject at all, but whether we're talking about just a second. Sorry.
There are several questions even are coming from your place.
Yes, sorry. Whether we are talking about legitimacy of the movement itself, and basically the lack of political will on the side of the European Union and the institutions to basically recognize this as a legitimate democratic movement, because at this point there are other forces at play, whether be it they're interested in lithium mines or data centers or outsourcing other um, you know industry that is going to pollute the EU, but not something on the outskirts. If it's in Serbia, who's on the border, and that these kind of deals basically are now more prioritized, and the democratic processes within Serbia and countries like ours, who are aspirants, basically are not that at all that interesting at this point. If sorry.
If this is the end of the comment or question, I will continue if she wants. The point is, the point is that about new forms of political subjectivation, that this gesture of cycling to Brussels does not only speak about us.
Mm-hmm.
And my intervention more goes into direction, what does it speak about democratic capacities of European Union at this point? So it's not, and the argument is very simple. It's not about administration. Administration, the result of administrative approach, institutional approach to joint democratic horizon failed. And it failed because within European democratic horizon, there are demands for political subjectivities, as students who were cycling were doing. This was demand for Europe to recognize new voices in European political arena. So my worries goes into direction, if Europe can learn or from students in Western Balkans, can Europe embrace new forms of political subjectivity? Because this is our joint world, this horizon, not lithium, not, this fighting again, always and always again, introducing new polarizations, recalling the old ones, we are exhausted of that. And young generations, they don't want that exhaustion. They're looking for different forms. And there is no place for them to go anymore. This is the difference between protests 20 years ago and now. 20 years ago, the idea was, okay, if we cannot change Serbia, we are going to live in Europe, somewhere in Europe. Today, there is no this option, because we are facing similar problems everywhere. So now, this younger generation is acting as the generation that wants to stay here. And I think this is demand for European politicians, how to embrace these new political forms.
Thank you, Becca. And
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That is a hopeful note to end the discussion on.
Yes. Yeah. That was my point. Yes.
I was never expected to be the hopeful one.
Oh, yes.
But if you say so.
Yeah. Thank you,
But
Becca.
yeah, if we actually come to a place where we can now export, so to speak, the processes back to and revive the democratic processes within the European Union, that would be amazing. But I don't know if we actually it can be that contagious.
Well, it's not about being contagious. I mean, it's about that we do not have any other option. The problem with European integrations was that there was metaphor of road. I was writing about that long time ago. Road to European Union, it's not a good metaphor, and it's not good politics based on that metaphor, because it seems as if we don't have any other option. This new generation points to the fact that there are other options and that Europe should also open up towards political differences that he, she, or it's facing non-binary Europe. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Becca. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
This is the end of the talk. This is the end of the conference. Thanks to all the participants for the last 3 days. Thanks to all the speakers. And see you all. Have a great weekend and see you next time.